Hi, this is Alex. You might know my mom, Heather, from Shine.fm. This is the Shine.fm Momcast. Take it away.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Momcast today. Man, I have a very special guest. And Mark, I've told you this, but I'm going to tell my listeners this as well. I actually became a Christian in about 1990 and had only listened to secular music, and I found audio adrenaline. And it was something for me that was exactly what I was looking for as a new believer. Many of our listeners may know your song, Big, Big House, but I want to welcome you to the Momcast. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Well, I appreciate you telling me that story. I know when you told me that when we met up a few months ago, that was a huge encouragement to me. My name's Mark. I have a vocal disorder, which makes it a unique thing for a podcast, and the crazy thing is I used to be the lead singer of a Christian rock band called Audio Adrenaline until I lost my voice, and that's part of my story. So now I'm an author, and again, ironically, I'm a speaker. I used to be the lead singer of a Christian rock band that toured all over the world. I'm married, I have 2 kids. And I'm an adoptive dad, so I have 2 adopted children from Haiti that are just unbelievable, named Journey and Cristela. And my wife is named Aegis, and we travel a lot in an RV while I'm not on tour speaking.
Awesome.
And that's kind of a snapshot.
Well, cool. So talk a little bit about Audio Adrenaline. When did it start? You and a couple other guys were the driving force, and kind of lead us to when things kind of fell apart a little bit. So give us kind of the backstory to Audio Adrenaline, and then lead us towards what happened with your voice and with other things in your life.
Yeah. Well, we met in Bible college in Eastern Kentucky Christian University. We actually met the first week of our freshman year Bible college, and it was just a divine appointment because there was only about 450 people in the college at the time. So our freshman class had about 110 people in it, and out of that 110 was kind of the genesis of Audio Adrenaline, which is crazy, and kind of led us to this idea that we were always the underdog, or this always ironic story of how we became a Christian rock band that had the success it did. It was almost miraculous, to be honest with you. Kind of these kids from Kentucky that did this. But we started playing together. We couldn't get a record deal. DC Talk would come to town. They're like, man, we love your live show. They would pitch us to a record label. And then finally, we did a kind of a hobby song, almost a joke song, that was rap and metal mixed together, a song called My God, and that's the song that got us a record deal. And it was nuts because we always just wanted to be a rock and roll band, but the record label was like, no, we want you to be a hybrid of heavy metal and rap. And we're like, who's looking around each other and say, who's going to be the rapper? And it fell on my shoulders. But,
oh, no.
So we had this crazy beginning of like, what is God doing? We moved to Nashville. Our first record wasn't that good, as you can imagine, rap and metal being mixed together. Right. And the record label was like, yeah, no one really likes this. I mean, it did okay, but we could put on a really good live show. So again, Toby, who's a dear friend of mine, basically went to the label and said, hey, give these guys one more shot. And then that next record was an album called Don't Censor Me, and that had a song called Big House on it. Big House was the number one, I mean, according to who you talk to, but CCM magazine basically said this was the number one song of the 1990s in Christian music, which is crazy for us. Again, because, we were about to get dropped, and we were this really bad experiment gone wrong.
Right.
But God redeemed it and had a bigger story. So we started to play music, and that record came out, and then Big House started to become a hit on Christian radio. And we had no idea what was happening, but we were on tour with the Newsboys at the time. And then eventually with DC Talk on the Free at Last tour.
Yeah.
If you remember that album.
I do,
DC
yeah.
Talk.
Yeah.
And everywhere we went, people would sing Big House. And we finally got back to Nashville, and our record label was like, you guys, this record is just blowing up. It went on to sell 500,000 copies.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, we were one of the kind of it bands of the 90s. We were became one of the iconic Christian rock bands of the 90s. It was us, really the Newsboys, and probably DC Talk.
Yeah, yeah.
And then later in the decade was Third Day and Jars of Clay. But,
yeah.
And we were headlining festivals. We were touring all over the world. You know, we won a lot of double ones, and we had a lot of #1 singles, and all of it just blew our minds. And then we won 2 Grammy Awards, and our ministry and our platform was a dream come true. I was a preacher's kid who always prayed for a platform, and it happened.
Right.
But then things started to fall apart for me. I started to lose my voice, which was a big thing. But also, a part of my story was I was losing my marriage at the same time. And all that was happening. My marriage, the issues I kept secret, even from the guys in the band. I was isolating, and what I really didn't know, I was dipping into depression. I was keeping a lot of my hurts and a lot of my pain to myself. You know, we'd been on the road for almost 15 years at this point, and I wasn't really tied to a local church. Or, you know, we were gone every weekend. And we kind of looked at ourselves as our own little, you know, small group, but at the same time, it wasn't real healthy. Just because you're together so much that, I don't know, it almost implodes on you a little bit. But anyway, I was isolated, lonely, depressed, and eventually the band was like, hey, your voice, you know, let's just be honest, it doesn't work anymore. And we're not the band that we once were, or what we once was. And, you know, I was like, well, what if you guys got a new lead singer? And they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to call it a day and just say, hey, you know, God's going to take us all in a different direction. We called it quits. We did our last tour. I was still holding a lot of my marriage issues close to the vest. The guys didn't know about it. And we were out on Mercy Me at that time. And I am just so sad. I would sneak out into the audience with a hoodie on and just kind of get lost in worship during Bart and the guys' set, just clinging to any hope I had, trying to be anonymous in the audience, because it was my church family. I didn't really have one, and I was all hanging on to hope, but I didn't want anybody to know I was out there in the audience. But I would just sit out there and worship and cry to myself, you know. But eventually, yeah, it was all gone. My marriage ended in a divorce. My band was over. You know, what I thought, any hope that I had about having a good life was kind of flickered out. And I didn't lose faith in God at that moment. I still believed He was on the throne, and I believed I was saved. But I stopped really believing that He had anything good for me left. That, you know, the best part of my life, the most significant part, the beautiful part of my life was now over, and it was just kind of, you know, from here on out, it's just going to be suffering. And a diminishing. I escaped into Haiti. My parents were missionaries there. I really kind of went there a lot to get away from it all, where no one would know me there as, you know, this Christian rock guy that lost everything. Knew me as Mark, the son of a missionary. And there, you know, amongst the poorest of the poor, God started to reopen my heart and kind of rebirth hope in my life. And that's where it all started to change for me. There was different moments of miracle stories that took place. That one really significant one, where He showed up in a really romantic way, but it was a gradual surrendering for me of self and giving up control and surrendering what I thought my life should be to what His life for me was supposed to be. And in that, I began to find my significance again. I began to find beauty again. And it's just so incredible how God writes those kind of stories, you know, and you find it time and time again in the Bible, the narratives of Moses or, you know, different heroes in the Bible. And it wasn't until they gave up or they lost everything until they find until they found their true purpose.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you talk a little bit about the mission in Haiti and how that has become so much more significant in your life? Because that is something that you guys started, the Hands and Feet project, with Audio Adrenaline. But how did God use that? How has that become so much more of how He showed you the purpose for your life?
Well, when I went to Haiti, like I said, it was more or less just to kind of get away, be with my mom and dad, and be, I guess, invisible in a way, because I was dealing with a lot of shame. What I didn't know is God was drawing me closer to Jesus by being with the poor. Matthew 25 makes it pretty clear that Jesus waits for us among the marginalized, the poor, the least of these. Mm-hmm. When I started to engage and see the need of a people group, and a beautiful people group. It's, they have broken infrastructure. There's extreme poverty there, broken families and kids that are hungry. You start to forget about what you've lost or the things that you lack because they seem small and insignificant. And all of a sudden your life and your perspective is opened up to this bigger worldview, this God-shaped worldview when you connect with the least of these. So there in Haiti, I was able to forget about myself, which is how we're supposed to live our lives in the first place. Mm-hmm. And it was there God started to bring me joy again. I didn't, I wasn't finding joy in being on stage because there wasn't a stage for me. I wasn't writing songs, and I wasn't even listening to any radio or anything like that. It was just me in Haiti. But there I started to find purpose and joy, and that's where God started to grab my heart. I started to go back to church. A pastor friend of mine, I connected with a church, a pastor named Jamie George. He invited me into a small group, and that was the second piece of kind of my being reborn again, like my getting reborn again, which is being in community. So it was serving the poor and being in community were the two things that led to my rebirth and finding beauty and kind of a resurrection of my heart. It was so plugging back into church, and not just going to church, but getting into relationship with guys that could really help me and encourage one another. And instead of leaning on isolation and depression and kind of hiding, my struggles, it was, no, let's do life together. And the combination of real community and serving the poor, my life exploded and became bigger than it ever was. My heart was than it was ever with Audio Adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And I started to serve in Haiti, and we started that ministry, the Hands and Feet Project. It began to grow. I became the executive director of that. I really didn't want to, but one of my mentors, his name's Steve Fair, and he's from Michigan, and he's on our board. He's like, Mark, this is what God placed on your heart. You need to go lead this. And that's what I did for about a decade. I was the executive director of this ministry to orphans in Haiti called the Hands and Feet Project. And I watched, again, miracle after miracle. I was remarried. I got married again to an incredible woman named Aegis. And God just gave me her at that church where Jamie was my pastor. And we fell in love going to Haiti, and then we adopted 2 kids. And now our lives are dedicated to really sharing the story, not only of kids in Haiti, but kids around the world that need help, and helping families stay together. And because God's taught us so much through adopting children, what the importance of a kid, of a boy and a girl having a mom and a dad. So we fight for families out there to stay together, to preserve them, and then we fight for kids that have lost their families to reunify them if possible. And if that's not an option, we just fight to provide them with a family through adoption or the best possible way. Period. Right. And that's our purpose. So I don't sing in a rock and roll band anymore, but I feel like a rock star because God's given me this great purpose, and I'm just on fire about it, and we love every minute, and we travel and we tell these kind of stories now.
So talk to me about Haiti a little bit, in the sense you were there, the earthquake hit in 2010. How are things now, 10 years later? How often do you go, and what are things like now? What are some needs that you still know of that are there? Obviously not just spiritual needs, but physical needs 10 years after that earthquake.
Yeah, well, my wife and I were there during the earthquake with my parents, and that was just incredible to watch. It was incredible, the amount of devastation and the loss of life, and it was intense. But it was also incredible to see the church step up and come to love Haiti. And it was awesome to see the church in Haiti come together as well, just to bring glory to the Lord. It was powerful. But 10 years later, here's kind of what happened in a nutshell. For the first 2 years, Haiti was on the radar of everybody. You could see it on the news all the time. You're getting updates from celebrities to the Red Cross all over. And Haiti stayed pretty broken for a while, and they just kept getting in, some donations, and it was helping a lot. Then Haiti really started to pick up momentum from about 2012 to about 2018. And then it started, you could see a big difference in the infrastructure. Roads were getting better. It wasn't as much as we had hoped for, but you could definitely see an improvement. Mm-hmm. And then over the last 2 years, because of really just a meltdown in the political system, there's so much distrust. I wouldn't say corruption, because it's just the way it works in Haiti. The people, when there's a problem, they blame whoever's in office, and it sounds familiar, I guess.
Right,
same thing here. But and it doesn't matter right now who is president. It's just a broken situation, and it's nearly hopeless to fix it. It needs as much help as it can get, but it also almost needs a miracle. It needs Jesus just to permeate and have a revival from the top to the bottom. But so the last 2 years has really fallen apart. A lot of demonstrations. They were connected to Venezuela and a fuel situation that they were supposed to be putting money away from this gift from Venezuela. The money's gone. Now the people are upset. The president's like, it wasn't my fault because he's a newly elected president. There's a attempted, overthrow of the government. Because of that, there's violence. A lot of missions have pulled out. Money has stopped flowing in. And a lot of people don't know what's going to happen next. And we're still there. We have missionaries on the ground, but it's a tense situation because it's difficult to get from Port-au-Prince to Jacmel, Port-au-Prince to St. Louis, wherever you're going to go. Mm-hmm. So supplies are not readily available. Inflation is through the roof. It's really expensive. And a lot of people are saying there's going to be a real famine there because of this situation. So right now, Haiti needs our prayers. It needs our help. It needs our attention once again. And that, from physical needs, from water, food, hospitals don't have supplies. It's a pretty dire situation. If people want to help, my suggestion is to go to people with Christian organizations who have boots on the ground, and one of them is the Hands and Feet Project. You could definitely go to handsandfeetproject.org and learn about what we do and make a donation. You could sponsor one of our children. We are primarily focused on fighting the orphan crisis. So we help reunify kids. We help preserve families. And for children that have lost everything, we provide them with a foster family on our campus, and a family environment where they can grow up and know that they're loved the best that we can. So that's how you can help with us. Because at the end of extreme poverty, unfortunately, the people who pay the biggest price are the ones who are the weakest, and those are children.
Yeah.
So kids get abandoned, they get trafficked, or they get put into orphanages that are really harsh, or even trafficked out of orphanages in an attempt to make money off of a terrible situation. So that's what we're fighting against, and it's a passion of mine, my wife, and even my kids. We all fight for it, along with Will McGinnis and his wife Andrea, who are part of Audio Adrenaline. And we're kind of all partnering together just to fight the orphan crisis through the Hands and Feet Project in Haiti.
Awesome. Tell me why the decision to travel around in an RV? That sounds kind of crazy to me, Mark. I mean, only because maybe I just like my creature comforts. But why do you and your family decide to live that way sometimes, or a lot of the time?
Yeah, right now we're kind of part-time. Right now we are in our RV. I have to get out of the RV because I can't hear because the kids are doing homeschool. That's crazy. So I'm in my Jeep. yeah, it's a lifestyle that a few people really love. A lot of families that we meet up with, a lot of Christian families who do homeschooling, but you take it one step farther. It's called road schooling.
Right.
So we teach our kids on the road. But we love being together, and we love showing our kids God's world outside of a school system, outside of just a regular public school, or outside of just a safe community. So we visit different churches. I speak at churches, and we go adventure together, and we meet people, and we live life on the road. I think for us, there's a few reasons. First of all, I come from like a gypsy family background. Our families my parents were missionaries. My granddad was a hobo that traveled around on trains. I was a musician. I traveled in a tour bus for 15 or 17 years. So it's in my blood to travel and just experience life that way. But in being in an RV, it's a little tight, and you definitely give up some things, but what you get is so powerful. You wake up and you're in, the Grand Tetons, and then some days you wake up in a Walmart parking lot in Little Rock, Arkansas, whatever. It's not all glamorous, that's for sure. But at the same time, it's a learning lesson for our family, and it's an opportunity for us to be together. We are together. Yeah. So we homeschool, and we're in a small space, and we adventure together. We explore together. We hike together. A lot of people, I think they wait until they're older to kind of live the life that they want, and by the time they get to that age, they can't walk anymore.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? Let's kind of flip it and say, let's figure out how to kind of hack the system and live the life that we want right now with our kids. And figure, let's just do it now. And then, God doesn't promise us tomorrow.
Right.
It's live your life today in fullness with Him and in abundance that He promises, and that's kind of what we're doing. And it's hard, but it's also unbelievably rewarding.
So if there's a person listening right now, Mark, that is going through the loss like you did, whatever that might be, the loss of their dream, the loss of their job, their family, what would you tell them being on the other side? What would you say to them right now that maybe you would have liked someone to tell you or talk to you earlier? Or what would just your encouragement to them be if they're in the midst of that kind of like loss?
Well, first, that there's hope. When you are a child of God and you have your dad runs the universe, he just didn't create it.
Right.
Your dad is in charge. He runs this joint. Every molecule. He's got a plan for your life. Even though it looks dismal, it's so sad right now. You're brokenhearted. There is a better tomorrow. That's a promise that God has for each of His kids. It's not going to look like what you think or what it should. So my advice to you is embrace the surrender. Because what God is doing right now is drawing you out into deep water. When we're tied up to the port and we're in control, it feels good, it feels safe, we don't have a need for Him. But when a storm hits and we're drawn out to the big waves, and all we can rely on is God. And that's what He wants this life to be, is fully surrendered in a life that's adventuresome and dynamic, sometimes brutally scary, but it's also incredibly beautiful to live life in the fullest with Him. And you're just now embarking on that next big journey. And it's through these times of pain and suffering where you enter into your biggest, most beautiful life. So hang on. There's change coming, and God's going to do a new thing. And He redeems all things. I was at church last week, and a pastor reminded me, and we were in the Florida Keys in a little bitty church. We get to experience all these churches, which is amazing. This old pastor, he says, God renews. God makes all things new. He doesn't make all new things. Right? So when I went through it, went through hardship and heartbreak. It just felt like He was done with me, and He was going to go and move to somebody else to give them a good life or to give them the blessings, just to make their life abundant. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of finished. But God doesn't do that. He doesn't make new relationships with people. He doesn't make new things. He's committed to making all things new. And that includes you in your journey. He is crazy about you. He's romantic for you. And if you wait on him, you're going to see a story unfold that's going to be beautiful. And when it does, make sure you write it down. That's been the beauty of having a book, is when you write it down, it's almost like building these Ebenezer's, like these monuments of what he's done in your life. Take time, embrace your testimony when you finally get to see the other side, so that you can share it. Because when we tell our stories, he gets incredible glory from that.
That's awesome. Well, the book is called Losing My Voice to Find It, and it is available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then, as we talked about a little bit earlier, if you are at all interested in getting information about the Hands and Feet Project, it is handsandfeetproject.org. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable. And it's been a real joy to hear how God has brought you through that season and how it's so much better than even what you could have imagined when you were going through all of your fame and success with Audio Adrenaline. And so thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Oh, Heather, thanks for having me. I appreciate you, and blessings to you and your family and all the listeners out there.